Good evening, everyone. We are Team Tortoise, and today we are presenting a summarization of research articles on the ethical issues in Mexico, focusing on three critical areas: drug trafficking, human trafficking, and organ trafficking. These issues extend far beyond national borders. They represent global ethical challenges that involve violation of human rights, corruption, and moral dilemmas in law enforcement and governance. Through our research review, we aim to highlight how these unethical practices continue to affect Mexican society economically, socially, and morally, while also exploring the broader implication for international justice and human ethics. Our goal is not only to summarize findings but also to encourage reflection on how ethical principles can guide policy, protect human dignity, and promote accountability in facing such complex global issues. We hope this presentation provides a deeper understanding of how ethics intersects with crime, governance, and humanity itself in the context of modern Mexico. I want to call Rabi Akhtar Ritu and Sifati Noor to present their part.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. The title of my study is Trafficking of Women for Sexual Exploitation in Mexico and Their Identity Crisis by Kumar Acharya. This research shows that trafficking not only harms women physically and emotionally but also destroys their sense of identity. Now, to understand why this study is important, let us look at the research gap. Previous studies mainly discussed numbers and causes of trafficking. Very few focused on the identity crisis and how victims lost control over their body and self-image. In the Mexican context, research mostly emphasized crime, poverty, and violence, but the psychological and social impacts were less studied. This study fills that gap by showing how sexual exploitation reshapes women's identity into objects for sex rather than human beings. Next, I will briefly review the literature. At the global level, according to the ILO, about 2.4 million people are trafficked worldwide, and between 6 lakh and 8 lakh people are trafficked across borders each year, according US State Department 2040. When we turn to Mexico, we find that it plays a triple role as a source, a transit, and a destination country for trafficking. Many victims are sent to the USA, where they suffer rape, abuse, and exploitation. Earlier studies in this field mainly focused on organized crime, poverty, and migration. However, they did not explore the psychological suffering and the deep loss of self-identity faced by victims. That is exactly where this study makes an important contribution. I have covered the title, research gap, and literature review of this research. Next, Sifati Noor will present the findings, conclusions, and recommendations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rabia Akhtar Ritu, for your presenting your valuable part. So now, uh, uh, Sifatino, please take your floor and present your part. Hello, hello, Sifatino. Hello, Sifatino. Do you hearing us?
হ্যালো, হ্যাঁ আসি বল।
Hear us? Okay.
হ্যাঁ,
Uh,
শুরু করব?
please present your part. Yes.
Now I'll be talking about the findings of that report. So based on 60 interview with trafficked women in monetary 2007 to 2013, most women were from poor rural areas and were deceived with promises of job. Once trapped, they were controlled by pimps, madams, or madrinas and treated as commodities. Now I'll be talking about the recommendation of that report. Okay. Um, traffic, sorry, it was conclusion. Stronger trafficked women suffer loss of freedom, dignity, and identity. Society adds to their suffering by stigmatizing them as immoral or impure. Although law exists in Mexico, corruption, weak law enforcement, and lack of data make the problem continue. The biggest damage is the identity crisis victims stop seeing themselves as full human being with rights. And now I'll be talking about the recommendation of this report. Uh, in recommendation, there are some steps, and they are strong law enforcement, punish traffickers and protect victims, rehabilitation of programs, provide counseling, education, and job training to help women rebuild their life. Awareness campaign, reduce stigma and show that victims are not guilty but exploited. International cooperation, Mexico and USA must work together to stop cross-border trafficking.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Rabi Akhtar Ritu
You're
and
welcome.
Tini for presenting their valuable parts and their contribution to this presentation. And now I am calling to my next team member, Mithila Kausar, to present, and Mahmouda Akhtar Shetu to present their part. Mithila Kausar, can you hear me? Okay, please start.
Assalamualaikum everyone.
Yes, please continue.
Assalamualaikum everyone. I'm Mahmoud Akhtar Shetu.
So we are going trafficking and violence. The extreme drugs violence in Mexico is not terrorism. It is a complex criminal problem with three main layers like a pyramid. Firstly, control profitable drugs rebate into the USA. Violence is a tool to intermediate reveal and to win the business war. Secondly, gangs and internal fight. Violence become more chaotic, subtle, hiring local gangs as a hitman and internal faction with subtle break upward and fight each factors. The makes the violence more brutal and unpredictable. Lastly, out of the control violence. The violence has become a heavy and habitual killing, like becoming decentralized and no large care about avoiding innocent people. It has turned into contingent of random crucial act. Then I'm going to discuss about some ethical issues. The article point to several deep moral problems like killing of innocent people, a culture to impunity, corruption, use of extreme cruelty. These start ওই স্লাইড শো করে না তো
Which number of slide you are in, ma'am?
মেবি থার্ড
Which slide?
fourth
Presenting. Fourth slide. Is it one? Is it this?
হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে ঠিক আছে
Okay. Continue.
Number 4, use of extreme fluently. And 5, the star slogan to protect. Then I'm going to discuss about our research gap. Most studies explain cartel violence as a business competition, but they give less focus to local bottom-up violence caused by gangs and food shelter. There is a little research on the personal motive of lower level members that make the violence works. The idea of anomic and epidemic violence is still not well studied. Few workers connect all the three problems together to show how they influence each other. Lastly, the research rarely look at the long-term social and ethical impact. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm requesting my team member to continue this session.
Thank you, Mithila Kausar. And now I will discuss about my part, factionalism and bottom-up violence. Now I will discuss about my part, factionalism and bottom-up violence. There are two models. This model suggests that Mexican cartel violence is not just the result of strategic warfare between large groups, but is primarily driven by internal divisions and decentralized bottom-up dynamics. Their key points are dual trends, decentralization, outsourcing, and lower level motives, then escalation of violence. And then now I will discuss three models of Mexican cartel violence. Model 1, inter-cartel competition. This focus on strategic wars between the largest cartels for control of routes and territory. Then Model 2, factionalism and bottom-up violence. This focus on internal division and violence driven by low-level motives. And third, Model 3, an epidemic of economic violence. This focus on extreme, irrational, and indiscriminate violence. Targets non-competent like women, children, migrant. Then now I going to discuss methodology. This study will use a qualitative approach. Information will be collected from secondary source, comparative analysis, thematic analysis. Secondary source, that means academic article, books, reports, and news related to Mexican cartel violence. Comparative analysis means the three models. First one is business competition, second one is factionalism, and third one is economic violence will be compared to understand different causes. Thematic analysis. Thematic analysis means key themes like corruption, immunity, killing of innocents, and social breakdown will be identified and analyzed. This method is chosen because direct field work in Mexico is unsafe, so secondary data and published studies are the best way to explore the issue. And lastly, conclusion. Mexican cartel violence is not just about drug business. It is a multi-layered problem. It starts with competition for routes, grows through internal fights and gang involvement, and finally turns into epidemic violence, where cruelty becomes normal. Along with this, corruption, immunity, and the government's weakness make the situation worse. The research shows that to solve this crisis, attention must go beyond top level cartels and also focus on local gangs, cultural norms, and ethical failures of the state. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Michela Kausar and Mahmoud Akhtar Shetu for presenting their valuable part. Now I will call Fatima Nasir Tanim and
Hey, Orpa.
Nusrat Tasnim Orpa to present their part.
Hello everyone, this is Nusrat Tasnim. Today, me and Fatima Nasir Tanim are presenting a summary of Victoria Rietig's Prevent, Protection and Prosecute Human Trafficking in Mexico. This study shows that Mexico is a source, transit and destination country for human trafficking. Through field work and interviews with UN government officials, NGOs and UN representatives, the author identifies major weaknesses in Mexico's response. Several ethical issues arise from this situation, like corruption and impunity allow traffickers to avoid justice. Victim protection is very limited, with too few shelters and services. Incomplete and unreliable data makes victims almost invisible and in statistics. NGOs and activists who try to help face serious threats and violence. Poor coordination among institutions means many cases are mishandled. Resources are often directed more toward crimes like drug trafficking, while trafficking receives less attention. Finally, political neglect keeps the issue low on the national agenda. Next discussion will be discussed by Fatima Nasir Tanim. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Here I will summarize what the literature says about trafficking. First, global studies show trafficking as a human right abuse, but Mexico is less studied compared to other regions. Most research focuses mainly on sex trafficking, so labor trafficking is often overlooked. And finally, the recurring themes are corruption, weak institutions, and low political will. Secondly, I will explain about findings and ethical issues. Next slide. Uh, so our findings highlight several ethical issues. Corruption and impunity create injustice for victims. Poor state protection, like lack of shelters or services, denies people dignity. There are also threats and poor coordination which affect civic freedoms. Then there are also some issues like low funding is another problem, as anti-trafficking efforts get less priority compared to drugs. And lastly, political neglect shows ethical irresponsibility. Thank you for listening me. Salam alaikum.
Thank you very much, Fatima Said Tanim and Mr. Tasim Orpa for presenting your assigned part. Now I will call our next presenter, uh, Fahim Mahmoud Shoral and Rafat Tanjin Panto, to present their level parts.
Thank you, Merav. I will talk about drug trafficking, corruption, and violence in Mexico, mapping the linkage. A research paper written by Stephen D. Morris, Trends Organ Crime, 2013. Next slide, please. Mehrab, next slide. প্রথমটা রিসার্চ গ্যাপ, হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে। In the research gap, we'll talk about theoretical puzzle, like exact nature of the relationship between the corruption and the violence is unclear in the research paper. Secondly, the historical puzzle. In PRA regime 1929 to 2000, Mexico experienced widespread corruption but relatively low violence. The lastly is conceptual gap. Corruption is often treated as a catch-all explanation without distinguishing between types like bribery versus extortion. Mehrab, next slide.
Yes, I already changed it.
Sorry, yes.
Review.
In literature review, we talk about drug trafficking and corruption, like DTOs and drug trafficking organization cannot function without corruption. So that the bribery of police, military, and judicial officials is integral to criminal operations or include defense operation. The second one is drug trafficking and violence. Many argue drug trafficking is inherently violent, since drug trafficking organizations take legal mechanism to settle disputes. However, others like argue violence is not inevitable. Violence is costly, bad for business, and often avoided when bribery is effective. Next slide, please. And the last is corruption and violence. In that part, we talk about positive link view, like corruption and violence often rise together, both driven by weak institutions and political instability. And other one is inverse link view. Corruption can substitute for violence by creating informal agreements, according to Huntington 1968 2009. Thank you very much. That's all for me.
Thank you, Fahim Mahmoud Shurab, for presenting your parts. Now, Rafat Tanjin Panto, please present your parts.
Thank you, Mehrab. This is Rafat Tanjin Pranto. Now I will describe about my part findings. Historical shift in pattern of corruption under PRI. Corruption was centralized, predictable, hierarchical. It acted like an informal tax system, keeping details under state control and limitation violence. After democratization, details gained autonomy and violence increased. Dynamic linkage. Corruption and violence can be substituted. The relationship context dependent, not fixed. And Mexico's 97% impunity rate means most crime go to unpunished. Weak institution, lack of resources, poor law enforcement make DTOs less dependent on corruption, more able to use violence. Corruption as a scapegoat, and politicians frequently overstate corruption's role to deflect blame from institutional failures. Next slide, please. Corruption dual role. Corruption is not always destabilizing to the decentralized corruption contribute to greater instability. State anti-corruption efforts and violence. Increased enforcement has fragmented DTOs, causing violence trap wars. And policy implication, fighting corruption alone will not solve the problem. Needed reforms, state gathering, judicial and law enforcement institutions, reducing ambiguity and ensuring fair prosecution, and coordinating and cooperation effort. Recognize that corruption sometimes reduce violence. Please next slide. Political scapegoating. Next, political scapegoating, blaming corruption to all problems diverts attention from broader system weakness like ineffective justice and weak state authority. State complicity, allegation of collusion between government official and DTOs, and raise ethical concern about legitimacy, justice, and accountability. Human right violation. Military crackdown often led to civilian casualties, torture, disappearance, and extrajudicial killing. Research ethics. Mass data comes from politically influenced resource, risking bias and manipulation, and scholars face the challenge of separating rhetoric from reality while ensuring objectivity. Thank you all. This is my part.
Thank you, Rafa Tanjil Panta and Fahim Mahmoud Shura for presenting your part. Thank you all. Now I will call our next participants, Isha Jani Yasin and Farhad Hussain. Please take your floor and present your part.
Good evening, everyone. I am going to discuss about our research paper, organ donation and presumed concept. Today I am going to talking about organ donation in Mexico and idiom presumed concept. Let's start with the research gap. Next slide. First of all, in Mexico, many people need organ transplant but don't have any donors. Even if 70 to 80% people say they wanted to support organ donation, but only 5% are actually registered to donation. That's a big gap. In 2018, government wanted to fix this by changing laws. They wanted to move it into opt-in system and to sign out the opt-out system. Next slide. Sorry, আমার ওই স্লাইডটা এখনো শেষ হয়নি, আগেরটা দিলে ভালো হয়। আচ্ছা, here we talk about two methods, opt-in and opt-out system. Opt-in is where people wanted to sign up for donation, and opt-out system where people consider to donate unless they say no. So we have see the research gap in this, that we don't know why exactly people wanted to opposite the presumed, and what is the ethical concept in it, wrong information and mistreat the system. We have better look into two main model, opt-in and opt-out. We must register to the donation, or opt-out is registered unless the donor refuse. Other countries like Spain, Australia, France follow the system of opt-out, and their donation rate is high, but people still worried about their control about their own body. Families are not asked, not trusting hospital or the government. Then in literature review, The situation is more complicated. People support the donation in survey. They don't register. Why is the reason? Because of the myth or fear of organ trafficking or corruption. Mexican wanted to whom use presumed concept. It may be first building trust. They need more information, a strong protection, and respect for their choice. That's all my part. I wanted to call my next partner, Farah Hussain. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Isra. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, you can start your presentation.
Okay. This is MD Farhad Hussain. I am going to talk about three parts: findings, discussion, and recommendation. First of all, we try to see findings. First of all, we need to understand why people object, main objection. There are some reasons: confusion, autonomy, mistrust, and social inequality. Confusion, misunderstood as the forced donation and family rights, fear of losing control, loved one bodies. Autonomy, without clear refusal about organ taken. Mistrust and social inequality. Poor may be unaware of their rights. Next slide, please. Hello. Next slide. Okay. Discussion point. There are some points: ethical advantage and uh, ethical advantage. Respects majority wish to donate and prevent missed donation due to non registration, and then saves more lives through increased availability. And finally, needs public trust, education, and safeguard. Next slide. Finally, recommendation for Mexico public education. We need to clear trustworthy companies to inform citizens. And next, transparency and adults. Builds trust in health in institution. And finally, family role. Define rights clearly to avoid backlash. And finally, additional ideas. The mandate choice during ID renewal incentives. That's all my part. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. This is MD Sajid. Today, I will talk about the connection between narco-violence, forced displacement, and sex trafficking in Mexico. This presentation is based on a study by Kumar Acharya and Jennifer Bryson Clark. This research looks at how corruption, especially in politics and law enforcement, play a big role in these problems. By the end, we will see how corruption can both cause and control violence and what that means for policy and justice. Mexico has faced high levels of drug-related violence for many years. Organized crime groups fight for control, and ordinary people often have to leave their homes because of the danger. Along with this, sex trafficking, the buying and selling of people for sexual exploitation, has grown. These issues are deeply connected to corruption in government and police. The study asks, how does corruption make these problems worse, and can understanding it help us find better solutions? Many studies already talk about crime, corruption, and violence, but few explain how corruption directly causes violence. Most research gap does not separate it two key forms of corruption, such as centralized corruption, where the one group controls everything, and fragmented corruption, where many groups compete. Also, most studies look at either the drug trade or violence alone, not both together. This study tries to connect these missing parts. Previous research show that Corruption weakens government and destroys public trust. When leaders or police take bribes, the rule of law becomes meaningless. In such weak states, criminal groups can act fairly because they know they won't be punished. However, past studies don't clearly explain how corruption changes over time or how it spreads when politics or leadership change. This gap makes it harder to understand why violence rises or falls. Criminal groups often survive by bribing officials. They are money instead of guns when it's easier, both in places where political systems are fragmented. Meaning power is divided, violence often increases both no one group is in full control. In contrast, when corruption is centralized, one leader or network. There is a big debate. Does corruption actually reduce violence or does it always make things worse? Thank you.
Assalamualaikum, myself Miraj Mahmood. Here now I am presenting my part. First of all, the topic is about sex trafficking. Another big problem is sex trafficking. Cartels and other groups trick or kidnap women and children. They promise jobs or studies but then force them into prostitution. Mexico is both a country where victims are taken from and also a transit point for trafficking. Cartels earn money from this crime, and corruption in police or government means many cases are never punished. Victims feel afraid to speak out because they do not trust the system. Corruption is at the center for everything. Without corrupt police and politicians, cartels would not be so powerful. Corruption makes injustice weak and victims feel hopeless. It protects criminals and hurts the poor. In the conclusion, in short, drug violence, forced displacement, and sex trafficking are deeply connected, and corruption is what keeps them alive. If Mexico wants peace, it is not enough to fight cartels with guns. The country also needs to fight corruption, protect victims, and make institutions strong. Thank you for listening. I hope this talk showed how corruption links these crimes and why solving corruption is the most important step to create peace and justice.
Now I am me, MD Meher Hussain and Muhtazi Hasnat presenting our last paper, Trafficking of Women in Mexico and Their Health Risks. That was published by Kumar Acharya in 2015. Paper sheds light on the harsh realities of sex trafficking in Monterrey, Mexico, with a focus on recruitment, methods, violence, and health consequences faced by victims. So we are starting with our introduction part. In the introduction, the author explains that trafficking strips women in dignity and liberty, exposing them to violence and health risks like HIV or AIDS. While Mexico has long been seen as a source of women traffic to the US, internal trafficking has been growing. Monterrey is now a key hub, and the study aims to uncover recruitment patterns, trafficking methods, working conditions, and the health impacts of the exploitation. Next, I am describing about what is in literature review, what we got. The literature review frames trafficking as a modern form of slavery and violence against women. International bodies define it in terms of coercion, deception, and abuse to vulnerability. Causes including poverty, gender inequality, patriarchal norms. Previous studies emphasized cross-border trafficking, but very little is known about internal networks, especially in Monterrey. This is where the paper adds value. Then we describe about what method used in this they use in this paper. In terms of methodology, the researcher treated trafficked women as a hidden population and used snowball sampling. Between 2007 to 2013, 60 women were interviewed using semi-structured questionnaires. The research followed strict ethical standards, ensuring confidentiality and safety, with analysis combining quantitative data and discourse analysis. Next, I will talk about what they got, the results that what the result is. The result shows that women are pushed into trafficking by poverty, unemployment, and domestic violence, while promises of jobs or migration serve as pull factors. Alarmingly, three-quarters of the trafficked women were under 15 years old, with low education levels and little family support. So now I will call, this was my part to present. Now I will call Muhtasin Hasnat Muin to present his part. Muhtasin Hasnat Muin, please take your floor.
Thank you, Mehrab. Today, my topic is result, violence, and exploitation. The findings also reveal shocking levels of violence. Victims endured beatings, sexual assaults, torture, and even starvation. On average, each woman had to serve about 10 clients per day, often without condoms, which exposes them to HIV and other diseases. Women were commodified and exploited under brutal control. Meera, turn on next slide. Thank you. This is health risk and concerning issues. The health consequences were devastating physically. Women suffered from STDs, unwanted pregnancies, unsafe abortions, and untreated illness. Reproductive health was severely affected, with many reporting pain and menstrual disorders. Mentally, they experienced depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. Medical care was virtually absent or extremely poor. Mehrab, turn on next slide. The discussion emphasizes that trafficking is not just an economic crime, but a human rights and public health crisis. Women are unfairly stigmatized as disease carries while being denied control over safe sex. The author goes as far as to describe trafficking as a new form of femicide because it systematically destroys women's lives. Now, conclusion and policy. In conclusion, the study shows that trafficking is driven by poverty, inequality, and machismo culture. Although Mexico has introduced anti-trafficking laws, enforcement remains weak. The author calls for a stronger, integrated strategy based on the three Ps: prevention, prosecution, and protection. Then the last one is research gaps. Finally, the paper leaves several research gaps. The study is limited to Monterrey with only 60 women and focuses solely on victims' perspectives. It does not include voices of traffickers, law enforcement, or NGOs. Health outcomes are discussed but not clinically measured, and the demand the demand side clients is largely ignored. Future studies could address these limitations and evaluate how well Mexico's anti-trafficking laws are working over time. Thank you, everyone. This is my part.
Thank you everyone for being with us, and your contribution was so valuable. Uh, Thank you.
Thank you, Mera, for your support for whole time.
Thank you,